Hello and welcome to Skeptic Generation. I'm Eric Murphy. Today's Cinco de Mayo. Welcome to the show. I'm Eric Murphy and we need to talk. But first off, happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. For people who are not from the States or places that generally celebrate Cinco de Mayo, Cinco de Mayo is it's actually not that big of a thing. You know, when I was growing up, I was told, oh, it's Mexican Independence Day. Not really. But it was a battle that it's honestly celebrated more in the United States, and it's a time to kind of celebrate Mexican-American heritage, and that's mine. So for those of you who are celebrating today, I hope you have a great time. Be safe. Drive safe today. Yeah, I celebrated this week by inviting some friends over and making a big, fresh pot of chile verde. It was wonderful. I wound up making huevos rancheros for my friends. A lot of friends who hadn't had it before, and it was just delicious and good. And I was really happy about it. So for those of you who are celebrating, happy Cinco de Mayo. Today, I want to talk about truth. I want to talk about what it is, how we define it, and whether or not we have access to it. You know, we talk about truth a lot, you know, and it's important, but I don't think people think enough about what it actually is. So before I get into any details, I want to give the phone number because I want people to call in about this subject. I'd love to learn and to teach and to help people kind of shore up those epistemic toolboxes about how we understand the world around us and how we can do a little bit better. So here's the phone number, 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or if you want to get that crystal clear audio, you can call online by going to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. And either way, it is toll free because part of the cost of the show is making sure that we're taking that on so that all you need to focus on is giving us a call and, well, focusing on what you want to talk about, because this is the time and the place for it. We have someone who's calling who wants to talk about absolute truth, which I think is fantastic. I do want to give a bit of a primer and give a little bit of information. I know that yesterday, V and I were talking about truth, and we wound up having a conversation that spanned over 8 hours yesterday. And we tried coming up with a new framework for truth. Is it good? I don't know. Do I have the visuals ready for today? I don't. But if you want to interact with that and let me know what you think, after this show, I am going to be doing a Discord hangout that's available to all of you, not just patrons. The link is in the description for this video. If you want to join us in the hangout and kind of hear and let me know what you think and tell me that I'm absolutely way off, please do consider going to Discord and joining us. Other announcements before I hop into things is I've been going back and really working on Patreon perks. And so for those of you who are patrons, thank you for your patience. I am going to be dropping ad-free versions of every live show that has been going out over the next couple of days onto Patreon. So you can have those. I'm also going to be dropping Patreon ad-free versions of the podcast. And then I'm going to start releasing all of the back episodes for the podcast generally over the next few weeks. So if you want early access to that and an ad-free version of it to boot, go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Your support is what allows us to to make these calls ad-free for the streaming software and everything else that goes into making the show happen. It is sincerely appreciated and is definitely needed. We're getting close to the point where the show's paying for itself, and I'm really going to be excited when we get there. Okay. So I'm going to give a bit of a primer just on kind of the three big theories of truth, and then I'll get into our first call. So just so people are kind of up to speed, when we're talking about truth, the first big theory, and what you're going to see in a lot of atheist skeptic circles, is people talking about the correspondence theory of truth. And what you'll hear is that, what is true is that which corresponds with reality. That sounds about right. It can also be considered the semantic theory of truth, because if you wanted to write it out, it sounds very circular until you add in kind of more semantic things. The example that I read was, snow is white. Okay, is that true? Well, that statement happens to be true if we go out and inspect snow and it is white. And if that's the case, then the statement is true. Do I think that that's enough? I don't. I think that there are things that are true that we don't necessarily have the ability to check it against reality for, but are nonetheless true. And I feel like that's a shortcoming that a lot of people take advantage of. And so while it's incredibly useful, and while I use it pretty regularly, I don't think it's enough. So that's correspondence theory. Next, and by the way, if you disagree with me or I've got something wrong, let me know. The next is coherence theory. So coherence theory it basically says that the truth of a thing is ascertained by kind of evaluating the relationships between different propositions, right? So for example, if you are talking about, the moon is, there's a full moon out. Okay, well, how can I evaluate the truth of that? It's not just about looking up and seeing the moon. It's also going, okay, is it nighttime? What time of month is it? Have we observed this? And all of that stuff. And those kinds of things all come together to shore up and kind of create this bed of evidence that supports the truth of the fact that, the moon is full. I don't like that either. But I do want to support the fact that it is rigorous. And so quite a few people believe that the coherence theory of truth allows us to access truth. I think it helps get past some of the shortfalls of the correspondence theory, but it has problems of its own. And then the last real big one, there are others, but the last real big one is the pragmatic theory of truth. The pragmatic theory of truth for me is my least favorite. It says that essentially truth is useful, and you can, understanding true things is going to give you the best view of the world. And so if you were to look at the utility of a thing, you can determine its truthfulness or its truth value, or however you want to phrase that. I don't like that at all. I think that there's a level of optimism in pragmatic theory of truth that that people put on things being correct. I don't follow, but if you are a pragmatist and I have completely butchered it, give us a call. I'm happy to talk to you. Let's move on and talk to our first caller. Give me just a second. Okay. Let's talk to Reese in the UK. Reese, you are live on the show. How's it going?
Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Doing all right. For people who don't know, I want to be fully transparent. Reese is a friend of mine, and I am happy to talk to you, brother. Let me just get your name in the lower third here.
All good, mate. Yeah, I could not stop thinking about the topic when you brought it up the other day.
Yeah. All right. Hit me. What do you got?
Well, you actually mentioned most of the ones that I've kind of got listed down here. What you call pragmatic theory is kind of what I've known as metaphorical truth. But I think I'm most in alignment with that correspondence one.
Okay.
So to me, truth is something that is in accordance with facts or knowledge. Because we don't have access to a complete understanding of the world and reality. So we kind of have to go with what is best known. And then you've obviously got with knowledge, it's a justified belief gained through education or experience. But if it's all viewed through that lens, you've got problems.
Hold on. What's your definition of knowledge again?
A justified belief gained through education or experience. It's the best definition I can find without going circular. Because if you look up what truth is,
people
it will talk about knowledge, and then you look up what knowledge is, and it will talk about from justified true belief.
Yeah,
so
JTB is.
You end up with this circle.
Well, and not just that, but I feel like we can have an entire conversation about JTB, justified true belief, and whether or not that's adequate for knowledge. But I know that is definitely going to take us off of the topic. But either on the show or either on air or off air, I'm happy to have that debate.
Oh yeah.
But okay, so
well, just to sort of go through with this in terms of the problems we have with access on truth. Newton's laws are true until we realize that they don't work in some cases. So then you got Einstein with the theory of relativity, which is truer than Newton's law, and now we're finding out that doesn't work in some cases either. So we can never, in terms of science and everything, you can never declare something as true, but you instead get your theories, which is the best explanation on the data we have access to.
It's interesting that you said truer. Do you think that there are different degrees of truth?
Yeah, I think you have something that is more accurate, essentially. Mm-hmm. So you can state something that is broadly true, but then you'll have a degree of accuracy where you start narrowing it down with a statement that is more accurate than the initial statement.
Getting closer to the truth, though, I don't think I would necessarily call that a type of true. The statement phrase, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
Yeah, okay.
And so I think that is interesting because a lot of people did, have different things that they thought were true that were generally accepted as true. And we definitely in society have a very clear, idea of what we think is true about the world. And it is not necessarily the case. We may not have the technology or the perspective to see them in a clearer way. So do you think it's useful for us to say that we have access to truth at all? Do you think that everything is true to a degree? There are just more or less true things?
I think when we're talking about true, is we're basically talking about someone making a statement in accordance with our understanding.
So it sounds like you're saying internally consistent.
Kind of, yeah, I think so.
Okay, well, I've talked to plenty of Christians who are internally consistent.
But it becomes very tough when you're sort of talking about this sort of objective, absolute truth. Because if you're wanting something that remains the case even after we're all gone, I can say, I know, the T-shirt I'm wearing is red. It reflects the particular wavelength of physical light that we have called red. So even if we're to disappear from the planet tomorrow, there's still going to be objects that reflect that particular wavelength. But as individuals, we kind of experience that color differently to each other. A colorblind person might see it as indistinguishable from green. They're objectively wrong, but to their personal experience, it's true. So you got
I feel
to their best understanding.
I feel like color is probably the worst example. We might need to pick something other than color because the nature of perception is such that I don't think we can really come up with any solid, true statements about color. Simply because it's so deeply based in context. Right. Like
you'll get a definition that is of a particular wavelength.
Yes, and it's also contextual. Like, do you remember the picture of the dress that some people thought were gold, and some people thought it was gold and black, or black and purple, and other people said it was gold and white?
Yes, I think I know the one you're on about.
Okay, so we can argue about what color it is, but why are we perceiving the same image so differently?
I think that's what I'm trying to say is where we're we can only ever really come on to an agreed upon fact. We can't really know if that is an absolute.
So are you saying that we don't have access to truth?
Yeah, I don't think we have any access to an absolute truth, a complete objective truth. It's all done through human mind, and our subjective experience are going to shape our understandings of it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I spoilers, I agree with you. In fact, I define that as capital T truth, right? The facts of the matter, you know, we can't access that because we are limited to the tools that we have, you know, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our brains, our senses, like all of that can be wrong or can be imprecise. And because of that, we're just doing the best we can. So if we can never access capital T truth, how do we know that capital T truth exists?
I don't. I don't. If we can't access it, how can I even say that it might exist? This is one of the things that comes around with religion. When someone asks me, "Oh, do you think it's possible there's a God?" I wouldn't even know how to begin with arguing a possibility. You know.
Yes, and so here's kind of where I sit on that, and then I'd love to see kind of where you think. I feel like what you're describing is inductive reasoning, and that is reasoning using the tools that we have available, right? And when we make statements, we need to hedge those statements. Like if I say that all swans are white, I can't know for sure because there could be a black swan somewhere. I have not physically verified every swan on the planet to be white. And so there's that little asterisk after that, right? The black swan fallacy would be for me to make the statement all swans are white and not recognize that just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so if we have inductive reasoning, how do we ever get to deductive statements? Right? What is deduction? And like, how can we use it? So deductive statements are essentially true premises leading to true conclusions. And so we're getting past that whole, I haven't experienced and counted and seen every duck on the planet, but people can make confident assertions about things completely as if they were capital T true and use them logically. So if that's the case, then are we fooling ourselves? What do you think?
I often think we are fooling ourselves. You can, if we start with that one of the white swans there, is what you're going to have to do is leave room for that possible error. But you can operate on the, right, every swan I have ever seen is white. So I'll temper my expectations with that knowledge of there could be one out there, but that isn't in accordance with everything I have seen.
Okay.
So I'm largely, with things that I know are sort of possible in the sense of, I could own a dog, but I can't own a dragon sort of thing. If someone gives me a sort of statement, is I'm largely willing to accept it as it is true until demonstrated otherwise.
Okay.
Obviously, if I have things that already preclude that statement, then I would offer that up as a rebuttal.
Yeah, definitely. But what about things like numbers? If I'm making like a mathematical statement, do I need to hedge it with the asterisk that I could be wrong? You know, if I say 2 + 2 = 4, Am I still using that kind of inductive reasoning of going, well, every time I've added 2 and 2, it's been 4, so I'm not sure if it's not necessarily going to be 4 next time, or 10,000 times from now, but it seems like we can use deductive reasoning to say that 2 plus 2 equals 4 every time.
Well, this is the thing, I suppose, isn't it? Is say I'm measuring something out, and it's the thing I'm measuring is actually 2.2 or 2.3, but I just jot it down as 2 because it's easiest. As I continue making the measurements, the margin for error gets bigger to the point that all of a sudden, my 2 plus 2, I measure it out after I'm done, and it's a 5. So it depends on how precise we're trying to be about something.
Well, 2 things. First off, Nathaniel Thompson in the comments, call in. It's a good point. Second, Reese, if the statement though is 2 plus 2 equals 4, we're assuming that the premise is we're assuming someone's just saying 2, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. If I'm not questioning the 2, if we're not using anything after a decimal, we're using whole numbers only.
Yep.
It seems like we can work with those pretty confidently, right?
Yeah, I think with mathematical statements, because obviously it's essentially it's a language that we've designed to be as absolute as we can get. Mm-hmm. So an addition statement is.
Oh, Reese, are you still there? Uh-oh. Hey, Reese? You have gone quiet. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm going to give you one more second, and then if not, I'm going to pop you back in the queue, see if we can get that worked out. Reese, going once. Reese, going twice. Okay, I'm going to pop you back in the queue. Blaine, could you hop on with Reese to see if we can troubleshoot any issues that he's having? For those of you who are watching who are yelling at your screen, we're walking through it. I think it's important that we give people the chance to talk through it and get to where we're going. Not everyone has. So let's see if we can get that worked out. In the meantime, though, let's talk to Michael in New York. Michael. Oh, let's grab Michael one more time. Michael, you are live on the show.
Hey, Eric, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I was talking to my fiance the other day, and she said something that it kind of stuck in my head. And she said, I didn't realize until I started dating you how often people say things that aren't true and just have no idea. She said she didn't realize how widespread it is.
Yeah.
Because I've made a little bit of a career of myth-busting type of research in my field, and I'm very driven by data and all that stuff. And I'm sure it's exhausting for her at times, but I've been thinking about this, and when I look at the news or when I look at current events and just sort of public sentiment on issues, it seems like a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, religious issues, societal issues, issues of bigotry, issues of discrimination, really all of that sort of can be boiled down to people are not really educated about what they're talking about. It's very rarely, in my view, 2 very educated, well-informed people that are going back and forth. It seems like there's always people that are jumping to conclusions, or we're fed something that wasn't true. And I think as a society, we're probably not doing a great job of sort of fostering critical thinking and fostering how to check your facts and check your sources and make decisions for yourself. And I don't see a lot of that being taught in schools. And so I'm just wondering, first of all, what is your kind of view on that? And also, what do you think that people like me can do? I'm just one guy to sort of maybe spread some ripples of, hey, have you actually looked into that at all? And, I've unfortunately learned firsthand how much damage that is done to people by people spouting things off that aren't true. And I think our society would be a lot better off if we all were a little more responsible with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the question. Are all truths convenient?
Oh, certainly not.
So if all truths are not convenient, then even if we got people to pursue the truth more, how can we be so sure that the world would be a better place?
Well, my view is I have a sort of a model of reality, and that's how I make decisions. I think about what might happen, evaluating the consequences of my decisions, and that is not really effective if my model of reality doesn't match reality. So I think it sort of behooves all of us to, have as accurate an understanding as possible of the world, such that we can navigate it with some manner of success. Maybe that's a little too clinical for you.
No, that's very well said. I'm poking you so that we can kind of, pry that stuff out. I feel like people who have these conversations really often are operating on a lot of assumptions that we take for granted. And without kind of phrasing those, without talking about those details, I feel like we run the risk of losing new people who are joining the conversation. So
yeah, I for sure I could see that, and I also think there's levels. I hate to say levels of truth, but there's something that's maybe true, but also is misleading because it's miscontextualized, or true, but hey, they left out this important piece of information, and I feel like that gets sticky very quickly, and it can be discouraging for people that say, "Man, I looked into this for hours, and I still don't fucking know who's." Pardon my French. I still don't know. I still don't know who's telling the truth on this. And so I think it requires some discipline, and that can be tricky. Absolutely. And when we're talking about levels of truth, I think you're right. I think there are levels of truth. And it can be really, really confusing to talk about, because a lot of people can go, well, either a thing is true or not. But that is a rabbit hole that if you get me down, we are never going to get to your topic. If you want to get into the Jordan Peterson, there's a deeper truth at play, is one thing, but that's definitely not what you called in about. So what can you do? What you can do is invite people to explore with you. If you talk to somebody who's really, really into QAnon, getting them to question those things can be really tied in with their identity, with what they think about themselves and the world around them. And it can be very difficult because they can get defensive. But maybe they're not into crystal healing. Maybe they're not into, chakras. Cool. Explore those with them. Give them opportunities to use those tools so that hopefully they can remember those tools when they're evaluating other things. And then you're also setting the stage to use those tools when it comes to, things that they hold close to their hearts. And you go, well, I'm just being fair, right? And right. Give them examples and show them, walk through with them when you've used those tools for yourself to either verify or to change your mind about certain things. And I think, there has to be a little bit of divorce from the self here. Like if you are your beliefs, then it can hurt to, find out that some of those aren't true. And, there's, I publish research as part of my job, and there have been at least 2 occasions where I said, I'm going to write this paper and I'm going to convince everybody of this thing. And then in the midst of doing the research, I end up debunking my own stance and I have to change my stance. And that's the only intellectually honest way that I can move forward, is to go, I wasn't correct, and then you have to pivot when the new data becomes available. And I really do see how for a lot of people, that's so uncomfortable that they just want to avoid that realization. They will do anything they can to maybe avoid admitting to themselves that it was not correct. And there's maybe some sunken cost fallacy in there for some people, maybe even politically, but I think that that is a big step, and I don't think a lot of people aren't comfortable taking that step. Oh, absolutely, because not everybody was reasoned into their beliefs, and if you weren't reasoned into it, then appealing to reason is not necessarily going to get people out of it. But we're talking about a lot of different things here. When it comes to seeing a lack of critical thinking in society, I absolutely agree. And there are so many things that we talk about doing, right? Talking about voting for, supporting, both with your dollar and with your time, trying to better education, to help at least the next generation do better than we did.
And that's all great, but it doesn't make tomorrow any easier. And so, yeah,
Well, not only that, but it can also just be, I mean, it's insurmountable. Like if I don't like a certain gigantic corporation, I can just choose not to buy their things.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't, it doesn't really do anything other than I just don't have the thing. And so that can be very discouraging too, because you're like, well, now all that's happening is I don't have this thing that would have made my life easier. And this still terrible corporation is still doing terrible corporation things. And so you can feel so powerless in it too. I think that's a challenge for me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of, terrible corporations, when it comes to people wanting to save the environment, we talk about what our personal carbon footprint is, but we don't really talk as often about the fact that I think it's 11 companies are responsible for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions in the world.
Right. And I got to use this cardboard straw that's deteriorating as I'm drinking out of it. But, that's not where the problem was, No.
If everyone completely eliminated their carbon footprint, we would we'd still have, 70% of the pollution that we're seeing not having changed.
Right.
And so it's frustrating. Can I ask you a question?
Please.
So we're talking about big scale things here. What about personal things? Do you think that personal truth can exist?
I don't want to devolve into semantics, but I think that people can have their own perceptions of the world around them. But I don't think, I can't have a personal truth that there's no gravity. That's just not true. You can have your own opinion, but not your own facts.
Can you have your own facts about anything?
No, I don't know. I would say stuff that's not objective and measurable and falsifiable, I guess. The word fact is doing a lot of work there.
I'm thinking more along the lines of like my favorite ice cream flavor is chocolate.
Okay, yeah, I think it would be a fact that your favorite ice cream flavor is chocolate. If you're telling me that, I have no reason to doubt you, but that's different than saying the best ice cream flavor is chocolate. Oh,
agreed. I'm just appealing to, I'm just pointing out that there are personal facts. And
I could see that.
Okay. So what's funny, Michael, is while we're talking, I'm looking at the call screening, and I had 6 calls, and then they all dropped out. And I'm seeing them
maybe I scared them away.
No. I'm seeing them call back in and drop out. And so hopefully we're going to be able to keep callers on, but it looks like there might be an issue in the system here. And so I do want to maybe talk a little bit more and then see if we can take the next caller before they drop out. And for people who are calling in, please try again. Somebody wanted to call in about why they think that atheists are destroying society. Call in. Tell me about it. Okay. So let's see here. I'm looking, you said, what are some things we can do as society to encourage people to think more voraciously?
I've been on the questioning train, like instead of challenging, maybe just say, tell me more about that. Or, why do you think that? And like sort of maybe force them to do a little probing on their own. That seems to be pretty effective.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely agree. It's kind of what I'm doing on the show today, right?
Sure.
I may not agree with all of the things that I'm saying, but I'm definitely trying to push the people who are calling in to wrestle with them.
And I think a lot of it is just, my dad told me this when I was 7, so I just accepted it forever. And I don't think we revisit all of that. And so sometimes you've made it 30 or 40 years with this idea that it didn't have a good basis in the first place. But we're not really in the habit of constantly like churning all that stuff back up and going, do I actually have a source for that?
I absolutely agree. Yeah. That was kind of Socrates' whole thing, wasn't it? Right. Finding himself in a society where it was just taken for granted that some things were true about the world and the government and what was best for people, and causing people to have to ask, well, why do we do things that way? That kind of Socratic questioning, which you're talking about, I think is really important. So I'm right there with you. I wish that I had a silver bullet answer for you. How can we
No, I know that you don't, and it's, you know, the odds are so stacked when you have, you know, elected officials that will say whatever they want, and there's no consequences for the lying or the misleading. It's sort of like there's nothing I'm going to do to offset the damage of that. You know, it's just too big. But I'm trying to at least make my little local ripples productive and helpful to people, I guess.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're doing it. I definitely hope that if we continue to do that, we can encourage more people to, and hopefully make the best next generation better than the one we're in. Michael, thank you for what you do. And are you allowed to say, are you comfortable saying, what kind of journal do you work in? Is it too specific that like you'd out yourself, or is there like a general topic?
Yeah, I'm an audio engineer, so I do a lot of research on that, particularly hearing damage from concerts and stuff like that. A lot of, you know, that's an area that there's not a ton that's really known about it, so it's pretty new knowledge for the field. So it's a good thing to study right now.
That is really cool. Talking to an audio geek, I think that is really, really neat. Very cool. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
And thank you for the conversation.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you for watching.
You too. Bye.
That was nice. Oh my goodness. I'm so curious about why we have callers going in and out. I'm wondering if there's like a server issue with Call-In Studio. We will find out. In the meantime, though, actually, let me pop the number back up one more time. That way we can hopefully get people calling back in. 412-SKEPGEN, that's 412-753-7436. Or if you want that nice crystal clear audio, you can call online by going to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. And it is toll free. You'll get right through. You'll talk to our call screener and get queued up, and I'll be happy to talk to you. So with that said, let's move on and talk to our next caller. We have John in Canada. John, you are on the show. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Do you remember me, Eric?
Hey, yep, you're coming in a little low. But if you try and speak up or you know, as much as you can, we'll do our best.
Yeah, so do you remember me?
I believe so. Yeah. I can see that the last time you called in, you wanted to talk about the purpose of life.
Yeah. Anyway, I've been thinking about our conversation.
Okay.
Our last conversation, and I've been pondering, and now that I think about it, my doubts about God have really increased.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
And on one hand, it's kind of scary, but on the other hand, it's also kind of liberating.
Okay.
You see, the idea of a supernatural being controlling my every bottom move kind of disturbs me.
I absolutely agree. Just to repeat that for people who can't hear you, the idea of a supernatural being who is tracking everything you do, every thought and every move, can be disturbing. I agree.
Yeah, like we wouldn't want to live in North Korea, would we?
Not with the way, you know, not with what I've seen, no. So do you think that being a believer or that believing a God that is everywhere, knows everything, is kind of like living under a totalitarian dictatorship?
To some extent, yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to disagree. Okay. So I'm glad you're questioning. It looks like you wanted to talk about colonialism.
I just want to know what your opinion about it is, that's all.
You wanted to know about my opinion on colonialism. In regards to truth or just in general?
What's the difference? I don't understand.
Sure. So the topic of what I had put for the episode is truth. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're having every caller needing to call in about truth. I'm just wondering if there's a relationship there, or if you just want to hear me talk about colonialism.
Do you think it was a good thing or a bad thing? Do you approve or not approve?
Oh, I absolutely do. I approve. I absolutely disapprove of colonialism.
Oh, you disapprove?
Oh, yeah. No, colonialism is is abhorrent. You know, the idea that a society should feel the need to force their norms and their religion upon others. What the Spanish Catholics did, you can see just the effects of it through Central South America all the way up the West Coast. You can see it in the Philippines. You can see the effects of France, of England, of all of these different, it has an impact of destroying culture, and has absolutely ruined our ability to understand entire groups of people, because libraries are burned. It's just truly atrocious. I don't know. When you want to know my opinion on colonialism, is it because you're looking into it and you're wondering what the pros and cons are? Or like what's motivating the question here?
Oh, well, since we all leave here, I just want to know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I just want to know for my own sense of self, because William was motivated by religion, correct? So
can you speak up a little more? I couldn't hear that.
If I'm questioning the faith, I guess it makes sense that since Colonial was motivated by faith, if I'm questioning the faith, I should know if I just want to know if it was justified somehow, because the two are connected. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I got it. Yeah. So there are a couple of things. If you're a Christian, there's there is a commandment to spread the faith. And it's called the Divine Commission, I believe, or the Great Commission. And so you definitely see the impact of that. But no, I don't see a world where colonialism is good in any way. Usually it's brought about, and usually it's justified through really bigoted racist views of, oh, this is a savage society, or a backwards, unintelligent type of people that need to be civilized. And it's just gross. It's absolutely gross. And it carries these assumptions of supremacy that have a negative ripple through history. So no, I don't see any situation where colonialism is good.
Okay. Anyway, I'm still going through my journey. I was wondering, is it okay if I call you again sometime?
Yeah, absolutely. We just need to find a way to get your audio louder. That's all. It's just really low when you call usually.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We'll just figure it out, definitely. But in the meantime, John, thank you for calling in.
Just one more question. Where's V Bianca, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, V's sleeping upstairs.
Oh, okay.
V and I are still together. We are still happy, and after we moved to Portland, they have gotten into doing a lot of stuff. They're working several jobs. They're doing work as a board member of a local nonprofit. They're just crazy busy. And so when it came to making decisions about what they're going to do with their time, they decided that SKEPGEN, there just wasn't time for it. And so, but they're still incredibly supportive. They hop into the live chat pretty often. And yeah, they're doing well.
Okay, well, thanks for talking to me. Talk to you later. Okay, Eric, have a good day.
You too. Take care, John.
Bye-bye.
Views on colonialism. I was not expecting that today. Did I say happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody? Have I mentioned that Cinco de Mayo celebrates pushing out and winning over French colonial forces for the second time? Is it the biggest thing that Mexico's done? No. But I feel like definitely fighting to unshackle yourself from the bonds of colonial rule is celebrated. Like it's I don't think there's any positive there. That's interesting. All right. In the meantime, let's move on. And it looks like they are still getting screened. So let me check here. We had a lot of thoughts about colonialism. Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay. So, somebody, Nathaniel Thompson had said in the live chat earlier, what, are you using base 10 when we're talking about using math? And I am really, really interested there. Oh, actually, I think, here we go. Okay, let's talk to Chase. Chase in Idaho.
Hello there.
Hey, have you been screened?
No, not yet.
Oh no! I grabbed the wrong person. Okay, Chase, don't be a troll, okay? Don't do that to me.
Oh, I'm no troll. I'm your buddy.
Okay, appreciate it. Chase, let me get your info here. Let me see. CHASE. Pronouns?
He, him, please.
All right, where are you calling in from?
The USA.
All right, that is good enough for me. Chase, what do you want to talk about?
Well, we could talk about truth if that's really on your mind, or we could talk about the morality of voting.
What about the morality of voting?
Well, I've never voted before, and I'm a new voter. I'm 41, and I just registered to vote for the first time. Because we got to keep Trump out, whatever we got to do to keep the Republicans and Trump out. Know what I'm saying? But I'm a far leftist, like even more left than Bernie. So I feel like I'm torn, you know. I'm voting for Biden, but he's done some moderately good things. But, you know, this whole thing with Gaza is really upsetting me, you know. So I'm disappointed in him for a few things, you know. But I feel like I got to vote for the lesser of two evils. What are your thoughts?
Oh boy. All right. So we're just going to see how many patrons I lose from this conversation. All right, let's do it, Chase. I'm right there with you. I've cultivated enough leftist views that I don't feel comfortable calling myself liberal anymore. And so, no, I agree. I am severely disappointed and sometimes disgusted with the decisions that Biden has made. And the idea that needing to vote is to keep the lesser of two evils is really, really frustrating. And I don't know. I feel like the only other opinion that I've been shown is to egg on the fight, you know? And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing either. Do I think that, you know, when faced with two bad things, to choose the lesser of those two bad things? Sure, no problem. But I don't think that we are empowering or really seeing what we want reflected in our elected officials. And so, I don't know. I feel like more and more, you know, just because of the United States election system, voting in general, if done well and in a system that supports it, is incredibly important. I feel like everyone ought to. But I don't think we live in that system anymore. And I feel like that is more of an indictment of the United States system of electing officials than it is about voting in general. So the question is, do you want to talk about how fucked up the United States is, or do you want to talk about whether or not voting as a concept is a good thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. I'm not sure which way to take it right now.
Okay, well, I mean, I feel like we can probably do the latter pretty quickly. If you want to see your views reflected in a government that cares about it and will count those votes, then I think voting is incredibly important. And I feel like we should have an obligation to be a part of that. I also think that in a system where what you want to see in the world is not even an option, then I think we have a moral obligation to be heard and to make ourselves heard.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And to that, I think, you know, we can vote people into power and know that they're going to fall short of our standard, and then protest against them for not living up to our standard, and in the hopes of motivating them to do better or to be replaced by somebody who is better.
Yeah. I think that given the current political climate, the moral things that I'm seeing are landing people in jail right now. You know, people standing up for, it's we're living in a pretty fucked up time right now, Chase. I don't know. I'd love to see what people say in the comments about this, though, because
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, if we're gonna, we've moved away from the voting part and just talking about, how screwed up the U.S. system is. I know that we have plenty of callers who are not in the United States, and for those who are not in the United States, just a basic primer on what's going on over here. Is the most popular person is not the person, right? Whoever gets the most votes is not the person who's elected, not to the highest office in the country, not to the not to the presidency. It is decided by electors who are not us, who are appointed by the state to take a look at who got a lot of votes and decide for themselves who is going to get those votes, at the state level. We separate things up by voting districts that are so absurd and not reflective of the geography or the peoples that we have a name for it. It's called gerrymandering, and it's gross. We have a lot of work to do, and I don't know how we're going to get there. And that's where my more leftist views are probably going to get me in trouble.
Yeah, well, I guess I just feel, I hear you, I agree. I just think that we can make, like politics can oftentimes be a slow, gradual process, that, but if we allow Trump and the Republicans to take power, it's just going to be a longer, slower process. And so, at least Biden and the Democrats have done some good things like defending LGBTQIA people and, some student loan forgiveness and marijuana reform and stuff, but even in those areas, there's room for improvement, but at least they're not, denying climate change and pushing a, fascist agenda, et cetera, so at least in all areas of their, maybe in some of their international relations, but at least domestically, and I would just think that Trump in power would just be so much worse,
Yes, and I think that framing it as either you're with one or either you're with me or you're against me, not liking one is tantamount to liking the other. I think is a really, really flawed way of thinking. If I'm going to be true to my principles, I'm going to take a look at it and be like, this is all not okay.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know. I saw a Biden commercial that basically was saying, if you vote for Biden, he's going to, get Roe v. Wade back and is going to, and it's just, it feels like holding... It feels like holding bodily autonomy hostage until you get the next election. And if that's something that you could do, how come you haven't done it in the last couple of years? I definitely saw a lot more people like me who were fired up and paying attention and doing something about it when Trump was in office.
Well, maybe they just, I'm not sure, but maybe they need more time in office, and having a change in the Congress, more left-leaning people getting elected in other areas of government. I'm not sure though.
I don't know.
But again, with with, the electoral college and everything, I think we'll have more chance of eliminating the electoral college and going to a real one person, one vote system under the Democrats than we would under Republicans.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I also think that that's going to come with apathy. And I don't think we can do apathy very much longer. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that we have to see the full picture, and the full picture comes with people not doing what needs to be done, not standing up when they should be because their person is in office, even if screwed up things are still happening. And
I hear you.
I'm so frustrated by seeing people not standing up because their person is in charge right now that I wonder. I really wonder. So I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a more like clear, solid piece about it, but I'm not seeing very much morality in any of the system nowadays. The morality of voting is different from the morality of voting in the United States. And I don't think it's possible to find a moral line that I would be fully comfortable with today.
I hear you. I often think that maybe there is no moral option. There's just two immoral options, and you have to choose the least immoral option of the two. Or, if you look at it from another perspective, it is, from my value system, I think it is moral to do the best you can in a shitty situation. And because the alternative is to withhold the vote, which I did for most of my life, because in part I was disillusioned by the system, and I don't like the electoral college. I don't like the candidates, I don't like their policies for the most part. And also I wanted to hold them to a high standard and say, you need to earn my vote if you want it. You gotta, but like I said, I was more left than Bernie. So like, I regret not voting for Bernie in 2016. I think if a lot of people like me had voted for Bernie, then we might have avoided Trump in the first place.
Yes, I can see that. I think that if you're not going to vote, then I don't think you have much place at the table to complain. That's fair.
And I used to disagree with that. I might still, because like, at least, if you're protesting and using your voice in that way, that's good activism, but I think we can also help with voting.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just really, really pissed off, Chase. I feel like if we were really, able to have representatives who reflected our views, right? There are plenty of things that are the majority opinion in the United States right now. Opinions on Roe v. Wade, it's not even close. The vast majority of the United States is against it. If we talk about views on Israel and Palestine, it's pretty bad. Like, how come we're not seeing any of our elected representatives reflecting the views that the people who are voting for them are speaking up on, right? How come we're not seeing, the top 1% taxed at a rate that is remotely similar to everybody else? I'm not even talking about taxing them more. I'm talking about taxing them fairly. More or less.
And also marijuana and universal health care, I think support for those are like 60 or 70% in the US, but most of our elected officials, even on the left, are not fighting for it.
Yeah. So how can we say anything about representative democracy if we're not seeing our views represented in the democracy that we're voting in? It's
right. So yeah, I just feel like it's a messed up system, but the only way to have even incremental progress, let alone, drastic progress, is to keep the worst guys out of office because they're dangerous.
Really? Because I think that there are better tools. I think that there are tools that when we saw actual progress happen, right, we saw those things happening. It wasn't just Martin Luther King who was working. It was the Black Panthers who were standing there protecting them, right? It wasn't just saying, I disagree, right? When women got the vote, it wasn't just because they stood there and hold picket signs. They burned out buildings, When people aren't listened to, they need to stand up and do what needs to be done to be heard. We're not doing that.
I agree.
I think that we're brainwashed on this civility politics, which is a misrepresentation of how actual change happens. I think, yes, sure, we should vote, and we should make sure that the people who are representing our views are actually getting voted for and are actually on the ticket to begin with, and they're not.
Yeah, I hear you. And maybe
I don't think I have only the choice to hope and pray and stick my thumb up my ass and wait for somebody who is going to eventually, hopefully, have, represent my views on things to be, on the ticket. We need to insist upon it. And if it doesn't happen, we need to create the platform for them to be on the ticket.
Yeah. And there's different ways of accomplishing that. And I think, from my research, and I'll share it with you on the Discord after show, is that nonviolent civil disobedience is, like 2 times more effective than armed resistance. And there's different reasons for that. Like, one of which is, like, the bigger the protest, the better. And it's going to be bigger if it's safer, because then, grandma feels like coming and little kids are feeling safe to come and stuff. And so then you can have more numbers. But we can talk more about that. But
yeah, and in no way is my frustration an endorsement of Republican politics, and for people who are so nearsighted that they think that that's what I'm saying, I feel like they have so swallowed the party line that they forgot what it means to think for themselves. So for those people who are in the comments who are saying, well, I'm just going to vote Democrat. Good. Now insist that your party actually reflect all of the viewpoints, right? If you want to see your rights protected, you need to recognize that your rights are not being protected right now. And guess who's in charge? That's not good enough. Not even by a little, not even close. So.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like, I'm not saying like just vote and then you're done, or even that voting is the best way of doing activism. It's just one tool at our disposal that might be, like, it seems to be pretty important, actually,
Absolutely. And I think that maybe I'm just so far into the conversation that I'm not seeing the simple things. Maybe I'm not, I feel like it should go without saying that you need to be active in politics. Everyone needs to be active in being heard when it comes to voicing their needs in the society that they're in. And maybe I should, I guess, start with that. But I don't know. I feel like we've had politics 101. I think it's time to actually move on to 102 and 103 and to see. So. Yeah, and I've just to be clear, like, I've done over 200 protests in my day, for human rights and animal rights and the environment and stuff like this. And it's not only effective, but it's fun too. It gets your adrenaline going, and you find a sense of community, and camaraderie with all the people standing up next to you, and taking out systems of abusive power is a good thing to be doing. I'm just saying there's a lot of effective forms of activism. Some are less, confrontational, less stress inducing. Some of it is just sharing information online, or talking to your friends and family about these important issues, sharing videos from, good shows like yours and stuff like this. I appreciate it. I just, I think that if you're the only one in the room who's not being confrontational and you're hoping that you're being heard, don't have high expectations.
But don't underestimate yourself neither, though, because we can make a big change. I've seen it happening.
I want to live in the world that you see. I hope that you're right. Maybe I'm just jaded. Chase, thank you.
All right, good times. Thanks for taking my call.
Take care, and I'm glad you're voting. Now,
all right,
now
cool.
Insist on more. Do more.
Oh yes.
Start there and then keep going. A lot.
Yes, sir.
All right, take care.
Bye.
All right. I don't know if I said that well. Maybe I stuck my foot in my mouth in a way that didn't represent what I don't know. I'm just trying. I'm doing the best I can. Let's talk to a non-American caller. Let's talk to Chris in Scotland. Chris, you are on the air.
Hi, Eric. It's nice to Sorry. It's nice to chat to you again. I was just curious what your thoughts are on post-colonialism culture. And I do appreciate we aren't in a post-colonialism culture. It does still exist. Nor am I pro-colonialism. I consider myself a socialist. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on when a culture is colonized. Mm-hmm. I'll give you the example of South America. I'll give you this. What exists now in South America seems to be neither the original culture that existed, nor does it seem to be exactly the culture of the colonizer. Mm-hmm. It seems to be some kind of intermingling. And I was just curious what your thoughts were on that kind of intermingling of culture. Not that I'm condoning, colonialism, just to be clear.
No. I feel like culture is something that's consistently changing, and it is reflective of who's in charge. My actual go-to thought is the Philippines. Right, the Philippines was dominated by Spain for 500 years, and because of that, their version of martial arts needed to be hidden in dance, and so for 500 years, you have the development of eskrima, which is, it looks great and it's dangerous as hell. But it didn't need to be that way. I don't want to say that a culture is lesser because it was colonialized. It is what it is, and we, embrace the cultures, that we come from. I'm just saddened by, I'll give you a personal example, right? I'm trying to look into my own heritage, and I've found that I have Aztec heritage.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And we when we want to look into what the Aztecs thought, right? How much literature do we have? There are people who would say, oh, well, there were none. Well, no, there were libraries that were burned.
Yep.
How much do we have? Or let's talk about Ireland. And I don't know too much about Scottish history, I've got to say, and I'm embarrassed about that. But what I do know is that you have people who want to look into their native mythology and find very, very little because all of it has just been torched.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with Scotland, I think we've retained a lot more of our sort of our mythology than other countries. You've got the Kelpies and all that stuff. You've got the Loch Ness Monster. I think more of it's been retained than a lot of other cultures that have come into contact with the English. But equally, the thing is, Scottish culture and English culture, it's all sort of intermingled to an extent, and the average person doesn't know the difference between, what is Scottish culture and what is English. I'll give you an example. Harry Potter. Perhaps I shouldn't mention that on here. I'm not a fan of J.K. Rowling, I should say.
Go for it. You're good.
Okay, J.K. Rowling is English, don't get me wrong, but most of Harry Potter was written in Scotland in a city called Edinburgh. And in Clearview, wherever you are in Edinburgh, the giant castle and a park that used to be a big lake and a giant row of shops. So it's fair to say that a lot of the inspiration for Harry Potter is Scottish, and yet it's thought of as English. Just various aspects of Scottish culture have made their way into Harry Potter. For example, in Greyfriars Kirkyard, there's a grave by a guy called William McGonagall and Tom Riddle. And that is, a lot of that mythology has made its way into Harry Potter, but it's thought of as English. And a lot of just older mythology, people think of it as British, not necessarily appreciating the fact that it does come from Scotland.
And I feel like if you want to talk about the effects of colonialism, I think that's definitely a big effect, right? You have the whitewashing of a culture and you know, it being assumed to be belonging to the colonizer. That's definitely a big impact that you see. So yeah, I was not expecting more than one call about colonialism. I'm just surprised.
My apologies. I know the theme is truth, but it was on my mind.
Honestly, it is what it is. I have had episodes where I've wanted to talk about one thing, and it turns out that every caller was from Texas. It wound up becoming a Texas-centric episode. Part of hosting is rolling with the punches, and if this is going to be the colonial episode, then I fear I am woefully under-equipped.
I'm sure that's not true.
I don't know. I think that seeing good things happen after colonialism does not in any way justify, support, or make okay the colonialism that happened in the first place.
I totally agree.
And yeah, and I think I would be rightfully called out in the comments if I didn't very clearly say that. So, yeah.
It's a tricky one, but like you say, it is what it is. I mean, there are many Scottish people who are the descendants of people who would have fought the English, you know, who do quite like being in the UK. Equally, there are Scottish people who are fighting vehemently for independence, one of whom is a friend of mine who happens to be Irish. And it's weird. It's weird. Some Scottish people consider themselves British, and others, fiercely consider themselves Scottish. It's interesting.
I feel like people should be represented in their politics, and I feel like if they are not being represented, then their government is failing them. And if you are not seeing that, you know, if you're not seeing the views of your culture represented by the people who are supposed to be representing you, then I think fighting for independence is exactly what they should be doing.
I mean, the thing is, and not to get too political, we have a Scottish Parliament, but there are many issues over which we don't have a lot of control, and control is still held by the UK government, which is based in London, and I'll give you an example. The people who run Britain just now are the Tories, and they haven't won the popular vote in Scotland for 69 years.
Yeah, fuck that.
You know, it's very English-centric sort of mindset. Scottish people generally aren't as big a fan of the Tories. It's, you know, sort of right-wing.
And wishing and hoping that people are going to do the right thing, and then 69 years later, they still haven't done the right thing. You're not being the better person at that point. You're being naive.
No, I get what you mean. It's thing is, people in England are voting for the Tories, but the Scottish just aren't a fan. But it seems because the population of England is bigger, they're winning the British vote overall, but Scotland just doesn't like them, and we're kind of stuck with them despite that.
I don't think so. Then I think that Scotland, if that is the case, should not be a part of the same government.
No, I get what you mean. We have our own, but it's certain elements are devolved issues, as they're called, but many issues are imposed upon us, let's say.
Yeah, I mean,
to some extent.
I mean, here's the thing: is you and I can join arm in arm. You and I, you know, we're speaking the same language, and we can come together on issues, but that doesn't mean that we need to be part of the same government.
No, absolutely.
So, and then again, I'm speaking from a very, very low level with very low information. I'm sure that there are so many more complex topics that are being had by people who should be having them that are not me. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm just some asshole.
I get that.
Yeah. But
it was nice talking to you nonetheless. And yeah, I hope you have an amazing day. I hope V's doing okay. And yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. It's really good.
I appreciate it. Thank you for sticking around and calling in.
You're very welcome, and thank you. Bye, pal.
People ask, Eric, why do you do your show so early in the morning? So people in the in other countries can still get the chance to call in. We've had so many callers from overseas, and I'm happy to see it. These conversations should not just be U.S. centric. Let's move on. Oh boy. Okay. You know what? While we're on the topic, I need help pronouncing your name. D-I-T-S, and we have a certain kind of O here. How do I pronounce that?
That will be pronounced as Ditso.
Ditso.
That in the language of the Bribri, which is one of the 8 tribes in sounds like Costa Rica, Central America, means seed. So the word Ditso means seed.
Well, you are live. I've got your lower third here. What did you want to talk about?
Well, I was hearing Chris, I believe was his name, from Scotland regarding colonialism, etc., and he mentioned South America. And since that's my heritage, I'm like, wait a second. I understand that as a Scottish individual with the history they have, especially with one of those neighbors called England, they have that experience, but it's relatively different as to what happened here in the Western Hemisphere, this continent that is known as America. This whole thing about how 200 years to 250 years after many of our countries in this whole region became independent, mostly, that notion of where we came from, how colonialism impacted. Look at it. You and I are speaking in English. Si yo hablara español, apostaría que no entenderías absolutamente nada. Vous parlez français?
I don't speak French, and I can speak enough Spanish to understand you, but not enough to feel comfortable without sounding like an idiot.
And the same thing, that's the interesting part, because think about this. When people talk about America in the last 100 years, the idea is only United States, and that is utterly and completely wrong.
Agreed.
The term America was imposed by the colonialists to this area that spanned from Argentina all the way to Canada, all the way to Alaska.
You got it.
Plus the Caribbean, etc. So the question is, what is to be American today? What does it infer to be of the Western Hemisphere? And, that fascinates me because my work has, I've worked with pressuring the United Nations to change certain things. I've been in several congresses. My work is political. And one thing that fascinates me is that the Anglo world, the Anglo-speaking world, is utterly and completely ignorant, particularly coming from European and North American areas, especially Canada and United States. They're ignorant of how the world is structured, what is the identities, and European, I'm going to be honest, the European refuses to learn the impacts of their own actions in the last 600, 700 years, particularly. But they also refuse to understand the impacts of what happened when colonialism started breaking and our independences, be it United States, Mexico, areas in the Caribbean, Central America, South America, start happening, and how that impacted Europe. People don't understand that the process of independence here in the Western Hemisphere virtually destroyed and almost ended Europe as it was known at that moment. It almost destroyed it. Why? Because they lost. If they hadn't kept the foothold on Asia, Europe would have been dead. In a question of within 100 years from 11776 or 1776, within that 100 years, if they hadn't grabbed hold to their colonialism in the Asian or the Pacific area,
don't forget,
they would have done, and Africa, yeah. So if they hadn't controlled with that, and with the process of decolonization and the process um, of independence that was happening in the Western Hemisphere, yes, started by United States, but you know, continued by the rest of the continent, they would have been dead. And the influences of that, you know.
So when you say that, are you talking about economy, like the economics?
Economically, socially, politically, it would have signified its complete demise. It nearly cost them everything, the independence of the Western Hemisphere, and it did not cost them everything because they had the foothold on the Pacific and Africa colonies. But still, you know, that the impact that created when my region, my area said, sorry for my French, but F you England, F you Spain, F you Portugal, F you Germany, F you everybody. We're becoming independent.
Let me be absolutely clear. You can say fuck on this show, and that is that is warranted given what you're saying. It has earned the fuck. So I really appreciate that you're calling in, because I feel at a loss. You know, I have a call-in show where I talk about philosophy and religion, and I never know who's going to call in next. And so often I feel over my head without, you know, the experience necessary to do justice to different topics. And here I am trying my best to interact with them, knowing that I'm never going to do as good as somebody who's actually spending their life studying those things. Like, obviously, I wish that, you know, somebody who has that experience could be the one and not me talking. So the best I can do is share this platform so that people who know more than me can share those as well. I think that a lot of people, you know, especially coming out of, you know, being colonizers, are fighting this narrative that they were taught that colonialism was somehow a net positive for the people who were colonized. And they're taking that apart and trying to understand what the impact of that colonialism actually had on the world. Right? And so
I've always found that, you know.
No, go ahead.
And first, let me give you a thank you of opening this type of channels, of sitting down. There's many people, yes, doing this. Some are positive, some are just for the show. But I like what you're doing, and I like that you're expanding the horizons in that sense. And that's important to continue that process, because that helps to retransform and reconstruct our realities in this whole area. But referring to what you were saying, you know, I'm a person who was born in San Jose, Costa Rica.
Okay.
As soon as I was born, due to the conditions of the woman who was having me, poverty, had 4 kids prior to me, etc., I was given up to adoption. Me, and then 2 years later, another sister she had. So the 2 of us were separated from our core family, and we were adopted. So I was adopted by a Costa Rican woman and a Venezuelan father. So as soon as I came into this world, my whole heritage and the whole learning of my heritage was very near and close to me, because the 2 people who adopted me knew the importance of me being provided that knowledge. As soon as I grew older and, well, I came into adult age, one of my missions was precisely understanding what this whole thing was, you know?
Yeah.
When I learned, hey, I'm not a U.S. citizen. I don't have that privilege. I live in the United States, and I've migrated both legally and undocumented, if some people will call it illegally. Um, and I came to the realization that people of the United States, even Black communities, indigenous communities, etc., they don't realize that they're that without integrating the reality that happened on this Western Hemisphere, you're just effectively erasing and continuing this whole agenda of should we call it whitewashing, fucking up the history of lying in regards of the history and realities and the impacts of those histories, whereas you know, uh, colonialism was nothing positive. If it had been positive, then somebody would have to answer me, why did the United States become independent? Why did they fight an independence war for 8 years
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of England? So, and this, I've heard that comment before, and with this reply, it breaks the whole system, and the whole, all colonialism was positive. If it was positive, why did George Washington and your people decide to become independent from England?
No,
Wouldn't that be,
I absolutely agree.
that question?
And what's mind blowing to me is that a country that's history, right? We're looking at the United States, right? That the history of the United States is breaking out of the shackles of colonial rule, and yet we colonize and take control over places like Puerto Rico, and Hawaii, and what? Because they're not able to break the shackles that we have over them, it's somehow not as bad. It's worse. It's worse, and it's tragic.
It's interesting in that point, because I'm gonna give you an example of my own history. Every April we celebrate the batalla, la campaña del 56 of 11/8/56 or 1856.
Okay.
That year, what happened is, within the 11/8/50s up to late or before, a few years before the 11/8/60s or 1860s, 1850s, if people still use Gregorian. I don't use Gregorian. I only use Holstein calendar. So that's why you hear me say the dates like 11,850.
Okay.
I add 10,000 years on top of that. Well, anyway. Um, so at that time, 1850s Gregorian, my countries, Mexico and Central America, had barely been independent for 30 to 40 years.
Okay.
At that time, we had a series of incidents starting happening from the southern states, which was the movement of filibusters. One of those very well known filibusters was William Walker, who was a Tennessee born lawyer who was being given money by southern states and the Vanderbilt family to expand and search for better slave slave movements or slave incorporation that were getting, by that time, 1850s. Basically, slavery was at its dying throes. You had Mexico, several countries in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, Central America, South America. All of them had abolished slavery. So by the time of 1850 or 11/5/50 came by, the southern states had no way of obtaining more slaves. They were within that notion of, we're going to die in less than 50 years. Our whole economy is going to die, and the southern states are going to die. That was the worry in that sense.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
What happens is William Walker came in, he invaded Mexico, he set up the República, the Sonora Republic, or La República Sonora. Then he was defeated by the Mexicans, thrown back to the United States, put on trial, let go. He came down to Nicaragua on Honduras, took advantage of the civil war that was happening in Nicaragua, became the president of Nicaragua. So a U.S. citizen becoming the president of Nicaragua. And that's when we, the Costa Ricans, said, no, wait a second. We're going to kick this guy's ass.
Fuck
and
that.
We're going to not let him come into it. And we started supporting the opposition against him becoming president. And we set up a whole coup against him. And so he came to the northern border of Nicaragua to Costa Rica, or the northern border of Costa Rica to Nicaragua, southern border of Nicaragua. So there was a big series of battles, las batallas de Rivas, where we defeated him. And he ran to Honduras. He tried to get back to the United States, was caught by British officers, and British officers never delivered a U.S. citizen to the United States. They delivered him back to Honduras, and we executed him.
Good.
His last words were, I have been betrayed by the United States. To the southern states, we are being betrayed by the United States. Those were his last recorded words. That was in 1857 when he was executed. 3 years afterwards, what started?
Civil War.
Your Civil War.
Yep. And then even after the Civil War, it continued. Yeah, even after the Civil War, the traitors to the United States who fought against them, who spilled American blood on American soil. If you look up things like the Order of the Golden Hand, you have groups of post-Civil War folks wanting to go into Central and South America so that they can continue slave practices because they were being pushed out of doing it here. So I don't know. It's interesting we're having this conversation on a day that Americans celebrate Mexican heritage, right? We celebrate Mexico kicking France out, and I think that maybe this Cinco de Mayo we can raise a glass and hopefully remember the times that Americans got kicked the fuck out of where they don't belong as well.
And it's very interesting because, I mean, Cinco de Mayo is it's basically the story of how Mexico said to the French after they had become independent, because this Cinco de Mayo was happened on 11862. 11862. So
1860.
that's within 2 years after the start of your Civil War. So and that it's being celebrated in the United States without understanding what was the Battle of Puebla or how Napoleon III was involved in all of this, how the whole thing. The whole thing that was happening at that moment, and that United States celebrated this is just completely and utterly baffling.
Isn't it? It really is. Hey, Tito, can I ask you a question? A personal question?
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you were, by birth, born Costa Rican, right?
Yeah.
And you were raised in Nicaragua?
I was raised, actually, this is a very interesting story. My father, who adopted me, alongside my mother, who was also Costa Rican, my father was a diplomat for Venezuela.
Okay.
He was an ambassador, and from the age of 0 to the age of 16, 17, I had already lived in 6 different countries. He had been appointed in 4 years in Argentina, 4 years in Mexico, 4 years in Washington, D.C. to the OEA, or the Organization of American States. And then the last 4 years I spent in Ecuador. So I pretty much grew up between North, Central, South, and Caribbean.
So I am half Mexican. And I was raised by white people in the United States. And I don't feel like I have the right to call myself Mexican. And so my question for you is, do you consider yourself Costa Rican?
Let me explain this in a very
because that's a problem that I have. And talking to somebody who grew up and has been raised in a culture that's not, what their birth was, it's interesting to me to see how other people handle it, because I have a hard time handling it myself. I'm a grown-ass man, and I have a hard time handling it myself. So it's just interesting to me to find out how other people deal with it.
To me, it's very simple, and this is my own aspect of it. I'm a grown-ass man myself. I am Costa Rican. I am Central American. I am Mesoamerican, but I am also South American because of the heritage that my father gave me of Venezuela. And I also have heritage of and nearness to the Caribbean. So, in very simple terms, I'm Latin American. Why? Because
I can dig that. Okay.
Because I have that influence of all those regions of Latin America, and I have lived and I have been with those specific regions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you feel most comfortable saying you're Latino?
Latinoamericano or America Latino. But never ever reduce it to Latino. No, I'm not Latino. I'm Latin American, which infers to the history of the Western Hemisphere. There's this whole notion of United States. The definition in English of ethnical denominators are so backwards.
I agree.
In the United States, it's race and ethnical culture are confused. They have no idea how intricate certain aspects of ethnical cultures are. And due to the fact that they love calling themselves American without recognizing the other 35 or 34 nations here, then that even makes it worse.
Yeah.
In your case, if you have Mexican heritage, have you lived in Mexico? Have you exited the United States and gone back to the land where your heritage is from?
So I've been told by family that going back there's not safe right now. It hasn't been safe just because of cartel activity.
Yeah, don't get me started on that, because I work on ending the war on drugs, and that's another whole conversation. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from in that sense. However, for me, when I turned 18, I worked for 2 years, and at the age of 20, I took a motorcycle from Alaska, and I drove all the Interamericana all the way to Argentina.
Nice.
And that trip took me a year and 4 months.
Yeah.
So I traveled. I exited Alaska, and I traveled what is the Pacific area of Canada.
Mm-hmm. And you went through.
And then so I basically, what I did is I followed the Interamericana.
Okay.
Pretty much followed the Interamericana, then through the western coast of the United States, enter Mexico, boom, crossed Mexico, and then entered into Guatemala. I did a detour to Belize, then came back to Guatemala and went down Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. I had to do another detour to El Salvador. We were
Dito?
So what we did,
I got to keep this brief because I do have another call that I want to take too. So, yeah, go for it.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to, as the host, make sure that we're keeping moving.
So that's the point. So I think it's my experience that the most important thing when a person has heritage and has migrated, or is a second generation or third generation migrant, and that wants to reconnect to that heritage, you one of the main things you have to do is go back. You have a right to go back, but you also need to go back, because unless you're there and unless you're reconnecting and unless you're understanding where you're coming from, then it's extremely difficult for somebody to claim that heritage. And that's a criticism I have in the United States. Many people say, I'm Latino. No, you've never been here.
Here's the thing, is I've been to different parts of Mexico, and I guess rightly so, I was treated as an American, and I don't know how to go somewhere and feel like I belong. So maybe that's something that I still need to work on. But regardless, this is a conversation that I wish I had more time for. But I am really grateful that you called in. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. And hopefully I'll see if you have an email there. Maybe you and I can have a more one-on-one in regards to this.
I think I need to prepare. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So let me tell you, to conclude this in regards to your question. A veces hay que poner el trabajo para conseguir el resultado. Sometimes you got to put on the work to get the result. And in order to have reconnection, you must also disconnect. So it's an interesting
I'm gonna take some time.
Dilemma there.
I'm gonna take some time and think about that. And I think that contact skepticgeneration@gmail.com is the email. Give me time, otherwise I'm just gonna wind up crying. But
I give you all the time you need.
I appreciate that, brother, and thank you for calling in. I think we needed this viewpoint today.
Mi placer, mi gusto, y we'll have a further conversation in that sense.
Sounds all right. I'm gonna head over to but
as my people say, let me say goodbye. As my people say, Veshko Woblawa. Veshko Woblawa means walk with your eyes open.
I like that. Mucho gusto, amigo. Thank you.
Mucho gusto.
Whew, that was heavy for me. That was heavy. I do want to get to our next caller. Man, this is the freaking Cinco de Mayo episode. Holy shit. Okay. Okay. Let's move on and get into truth. Talking about truth. We're going to take a hard left, everybody. Let's do this together and talk to Cy in Illinois. Cy, how's it going?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Now I feel like my topic is a little irrelevant. Like we've turned so many times.
I mean, seriously, isn't that it's the nature of doing call-in shows, right? And it's why, like, I've spoken to people who've done, atheist content for years and years and years, and they look at me doing call-in shows and they go, I could not do it, and it's because you never know who's going to call in next, and you never know what direction it's going to be. And I tell them the best thing you can do is approach it with humility. Don't pretend like you know things that you don't know, and to just do your best. And I wanted to talk about truth, and I'm glad that you called in. So I did want to take this call. It's just, let's just take a second, recognize that was a lot.
Yeah.
And
pretty
then
heavy.
Yeah, and then pivot. I do want to talk about it. So let's talk about it. It is important. You want to talk about why is truth important at all? Right? So let me give you the stage for a sec. What do you mean? What's going on?
Okay, so as an atheist, I am unconvinced of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been talking to a few theist friends, and some gave the argument that, like, even though it may not be true, it makes a lot of people feel good. So, like, why make them doubt their religion? Because sometimes I like to criticize, and when the moment's appropriate, I might sow a seed of doubt in my religious friends, because I don't think what they believe in is true, and I think it's more important to I think the truth is more important than how you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always go back to the noble lie when it comes to this. Right? There was this really shitty idea I don't think it was Socrates. I'm not sure. Greek philosopher who essentially was arguing for the caste system and said that we should just tell people that their souls are different, that you are in poverty because your soul is made of poverty, essentially. You know, that there is a metal in everyone's soul that dictates what class they belong to. And that, you know, the people who are in charge, right, or who are in higher castes are there because their souls are made of a thing that give them legitimate claim to the power that they inherited.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's fucked up. It's really fucked up.
That's gross.
And it's called the noble lie because if we just lied to everybody and told them that that was the case, then they wouldn't argue and they wouldn't rise up. And we would have a more stable society because people wouldn't be fighting for privileges that, you know, if you just told them that they, you know, inherently don't deserve them because they don't have the soul, you know, requisite, that, you know, we would have a society with less revolution. We'd have a society with less violence. And I think you and I can look at that from the perspective, you know, from, you know, 1,000 yards away and go, oh, that's screwed up. Right? That a lie is not justified because it prevents violence. A lie is not justified because it makes people comfortable. And I think to encourage a lie for the sake of comfort is to condescend to people. To tell people, oh, well, maybe your tiny brain can't fucking handle the truth is so fucked up. And I, as a person, can't stomach the idea that I would condescend and just go, well, this is the only truth that I think you can handle. That's what pushes me. What pushes me to want to know the truth and to insist upon the truth is because I don't ever want to condescend to another person because I think that they can only handle so much. I think it's condescending. I think it's cruel. And I think that people deserve the truth. That said, not everybody wants it. And if they don't want it, then I think a part of it is listening to people and understanding, okay, you know, we're going to engage as peers. And we're both going to consent to having this conversation. Don't be annoying. Don't be a shitty person about it. That said, I don't ever want to condescend to others and assume that I know what's best for them. I want to give them the tools and give them as much of the truth that I can so that they can have the opportunity to make those decisions themselves.
I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you see in like pop culture, sometimes someone would do like a little white lie to make sure that a person feels better, you know, and that's always like morally questionable.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really good reasoning. So there is one thing there. So I was thinking to myself recently that like I like the truth more than the false, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
And I was questioning why. And the only response I can like get through my head is just because the truth is good, because the truth is better. But like I could never get a straight answer for why. And I was like sitting there thinking for a while. And like I firmly believe that the truth is good and it's like inherently better. But like, I can't really think of like a justification for that, and that kind of disturbs me. So I was wondering if you have anything on that.
Well, if we just look at it pragmatically, a clear understanding of the world around you is going to give you your best shot at making decisions that are going to benefit you and the people around you. You know, if I think that I have millions of dollars in my bank account and I act that way, I'm going to be in trouble pretty quick. If I don't know that the choices that I'm making with my diet are unhealthy, then I'm going to suffer consequences that I didn't even know. And I think that when it comes to insisting on the clearest, most accurate understanding of reality, if anything, it just gives you the chance to make an informed decision. And you can't do that if you don't have access to if you don't do that. I don't think there is a lie that you're going to tell somebody that is going to be better for them in the long run if you're not going to treat them like if you're going to treat someone like an adult, then you need to give them the tools to make an informed decision.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think that insisting on that for yourself is fantastic. And I think that if you think that you deserve the truth, then I don't think we should ever condescend to take that away from someone else.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I would have treated this a whole lot more playfully earlier, but this has been a pretty heavy episode, and I feel like I just diving right to the heart of it is probably better.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I hope that helps.
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling in, and thank you for waiting so long on the line. I know you were waiting for quite a while.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you.
I'm a fan of you as a speaker. I love how empathetic you are towards other people, willing to put yourself into other shoes.
I really appreciate it. Sometimes I feel like a bumbling idiot, but if I'm honest about it, hopefully then you can join me for the ride and not just, not just see me for the bumbling, person that I am. But thank you for joining me for the ride. I appreciate it.
Right. Have a great day.
You too. Take care. Holy moly. Okay, maybe then we've gotten the fact that today, this Cinco de Mayo, taking a moment to reflect on the impact that colonialism has had, that the absolute loss of culture and the radical shaping that it has had on people is maybe today's a good day to think about that. I know I'm going to make a margarita and think about it and think about my place in it. And I hope you do too. If you like this show, if you like what I'm doing, consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/skepticgeneration. We're getting close to the point where the show's paying for itself. And if we can get there, I would sincerely appreciate it. I want to read some super chats. It looks like we had Lucas Black, who, thank you, Lucas, says, lesser of two evils, voting, is a con job forcing Americans forever backwards. Nothing can ever get done if we keep falling for it. Unfortunately, Lucas, I agree. We can't just be okay with this. We need to insist on better. We need to demand better. And if we don't get it, we need to do what we need to do to get better. Damn, this has been intense. I am going to take a short break, and then I'm going to hop over to the Discord because I want to have a little bit more of a private conversation. So if you want to join me, can join. Check out the link in the description or in the live chat, and I hope to see you there. In the meantime, I'm Eric Murphy, and I'm glad we had this talk.